Hey everyone, so we're at Corsair. Again, this is the second of 2 videos we're doing with Jon on power supplies. As mentioned in the first one was common misconceptions. You should watch it. It's a fun discussion. But Jon comes from JonnyGuru.com, was the, I think, probably most cited power supply reviewer for a long time. And that site is still referenced in the comments. So today, Jon works at Corsair in R&D on power supplies. And we're going to walk through an educational piece, which is sort of flow of power,
right?
Maybe some topology discussion, and talking about some of the core components in a power supply. So trying to get people beyond sort of an 80+ spec of fan size and the bearing. Right. Before that, this video is brought to you by Squarespace. We use Squarespace for our own GN store and juggle complex multi-piece orders all the time with it. Squarespace makes it fast for us to roll out new products with detailed pages full of galleries, videos, and descriptors. It's also useful for your own resume sites, for photographer or project portfolios, or for starting your new small business idea. There's never been a better time to try and start your new business than right now, and we can vouch that Squarespace makes it easy. Visit squarespace.com/gamersnexus to get 10% off your first purchase with Squarespace.
Yeah, so here we go. We've got the, this one's the RM850X. So this is our 80+ gold, fully modular power supply. It has the maglev fan and all Japanese brand caps. And then this is the RM850, no X. You'll see that they're pretty much identical inside. It's the same PCB and everything. Difference being is you have the smaller bolt caps, which is going to impact your hold up time. We can talk about that later.
Right.
And it has a Hunghua rifle bearing fan as opposed to the maglev fan.
Right. And so using either one of these, I guess we'll start with the basics.
Sure.
And then I'll pass to Patrick Stone over here for some of the other questions. Can we do flow of power?
Yeah.
I don't know which side you want to start from, but
well, you'd start with the AC side, the primary
you want to
side.
start with AC?
Yeah. Okay.
So flow of power when power comes from the wall into the power supply.
Right.
Where is it going?
So you have your EMI filtering is the first thing, and that's going to filter out not EMI coming in, but actually EMI created by the power supply going out.
Okay.
Right? So that's gonna clean up the power, so it doesn't impact other things on your grid, which is kind of funny. So there's some devices that don't have this, and they impact the power supply in your computer, and it makes it really hard to troubleshoot whether or not your problem is your power supply or something in your house. Some of the funny things that I've seen: EV chargers for the car, and those tankless water heaters.
Really?
Yeah.
It's okay. Tankless
Didn't
water.
see that one coming at all.
Yeah.
And when I saw it, neither did I.
I was just considering recently buying one too.
Well,
maybe I won't do that.
Now you know what to look for, right?
All right. After that, you come over here to your bridge rectifier, okay, and that's going to create your bus voltage, right? Bus voltage being the voltage of your volt cap, which should be about 470 volt. Okay.
Is that usually consistent? Like if you look at your bolt cap, the voltage that's
It'll,
on that
it'll range from 420 to 480. Like I was saying before, we have an Excel spreadsheet that does math for us. Thank God.
Yes. Yes, we use many spreadsheets.
Yeah, you can increase the bus voltage, decrease the capacitance, and end up with the same hold-up time. But you know, sometimes when you fix one thing, you break another, right? You might increase EMI, right? So you kind of want to experiment, but also pay full attention to what's going on. You know,
right?
Put those practices in place, and then test again, right?
There's like software development, right, where you fix the bug and you introduce 2 new ones.
Exactly,
So, yeah.
And the same thing's true with hardware.
Right.
Yeah, you fix one thing, you break something else.
Right.
Happens every day.
So where does
I call it job security.
Where does it go next?
Okay, so from there you have your MOSFETs, your switchers here are converting it from the DC power from the caps to AC for the transformer. Okay, and then the transformer, this is going to be 12 volt output, unregulated, right? If it was group regulated, we're talking about some of the older or cheaper topologies. What they do is they have multiple windings with multiple outputs. That's how you get that. It's unregulated, and in this case, it's going to go to MOSFETs to switch it back to DC regulated power, right? And then, which again, if you're talking about a lower end or less efficient product, could be Schottky diodes.
Right.
That's an option. And then it's filtered through the output caps, right? That are going to filter out any ripple noise. And then, in addition to that, in this case, because this isn't group regulated, this is only 12 volt. you have your DC to DC output. And what this does is this converts your 12 volt to 5 volt, and 12 volt to 3.3 volt before it goes out to the connectors. And then in addition to all this, you have another circuit, your 5 volt standby, which is a power supply within a power supply, right? It's always on, okay? It has its own controller, IC, right? And what it is this is basically, even though their PC is off, the power supply is on, it's delivering 5 volt to your 24 pin.
Yeah.
And that's going to supplement your bias battery, for example. And it also allows...
Does phone charging come off of that sometimes when you...
Well, if the USB is live on standby,
Right,
that's a feature. That's a motherboard feature, right? So it's either going to supplement the battery on the motherboard, but it also allows things on the motherboard to work like wake on LAN, wake on mouse, wake on keyboard. None of that stuff works if there's no power. Right? And that's where your 5 volt standby comes in.
There's so many different ways to like dive into the sections here.
Yep.
And even to execute, right? Like on topologies we were talking about earlier.
Right, yeah.
Exactly.
We could have like 20 different power supplies open here, and they could all be different in some way or another. Full bridge, half bridge, group regulated, independent regulation,
LLC.
DC, LLC, you know.
So for people that are trying to learn about power supplies, when you're looking at that power conversion, the topology piece, what are the major topologies that are
commonly used? Maybe.
Yeah, from a high level, like, okay, so if you start at the low end, right? Let's say the lowest end, you'll have a double forward, which we also call hard switching, and I'll get back to that in a minute. Double forward, group regulated, which, like I said, is the multiple windings.
Okay.
And it might be regulated with a simple coil and capacitor type regulation. So the regulation is really loose.
Yeah.
But within spec.
Okay.
So that's going to be your starting point. And then if you dig a little deeper into that, they might use Schottky diodes instead of MOSFETs. They can do the same job, just the regulation might not be as good, the efficiency is not going to be as good. You're not going to see Schottky diode rectification in a gold power supply.
Right.
Ain't going to happen, right?
And this is all like you said, low end, just saving.
Yeah, I'm just starting with the low end.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you go from there, you can still have the double forward, but you can replace that group regulation with, moving from you can still have Schottky diodes instead of MOSFETs.
Right.
And then the non-primary rails, we call them the 5 volt and the 3.3 volt.
Yep.
Use DC to DC. So there's always that load on 12 volt. It converts it to 5 volt. It converts it to 3.3.
So like the secondary side can be a little bit cleaner.
The regulation is so much better, because when you don't have that, you end up with the what we call cross loading, where if the 12 volt goes high, the 5 volt goes low, goes out of spec. You can't control it as well.
Yeah.
If you only have a power supply that has a single output, 12 volt, and then you have the separate circuit, DC to DC, that then converts that, your regulation is completely independent of each other. And it's going to be so much more accurate, regardless of the load.
So if we were to pick this guy up and maybe zoom in on it, what am I looking at in terms of where this double forward stuff?
Well, so this doesn't have double forward. The easiest way to know if it's double forward is to just look at the control IC, the PWM IC.
Which a lot of times can be on the bottom, right?
Well, no, this one's on a daughter card on this one.
Yeah. So that's another thing too to point out is that when you look inside power supplies, if you're looking at the pictures of power supply reviews, you might see these little tower card looking things, and as John was just mentioning, they're called daughter cards, and a lot of times controllers are on there. Yeah.
Yep.
And so if we're looking, let's say this is somebody who's just learning how to do power supply topology, trying to figure things out. Would the dual forward or double forward part of the design be like over here? Or,
no, it would be on the primary side, because as a
Right.
primary controller, it would be on the primary side. Your primary and your secondary side are actually completely isolated from one another, other than the transformer. And,
Okay.
and the only way that they talk to one another is through optocouplers, right?
Yeah.
Which an optocoupler is something that you don't have the electrical connection between the two, because you want to maintain that isolation.
Isolation, right? And
Yeah.
so you're sending the signal through like light instead of electricity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so many cool things in the power supply designs, guys. And so then, would it be correct to say that a lot of times the primary side is on like in this part of the body of a power supply?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, well, like I said, they're going to be isolated, so it's a 50-50 thing, right? So it could be like front to back,
Okay.
This one's like L-shaped, square, you know.
Yeah.
But they are going to be isolated from one another.
Right. So it's not consistent all the time.
No, but you know, it's a dead giveaway. I'm not saying that people should open up their power supply, but if you open it up and you flip it on the bottom, you're going to see that defined line, and you're going to see the optocouplers between the two stages.
Yeah. So in this one, for instance, if you're trying to learn about this, your primary side might be over here, and then the isolation transformers here,
Right.
and then as John was saying, if it were a double forward part with
You would still have that.
yeah, and then the secondary side is over here,
Right.
and then your 3.3 and 5 volt regulation are
In this case, yes, because this has DC to DC.
yeah, okay.
Otherwise, you're just going to see extra inductor coils for the regulation after they come off the transformer. Like I was saying, the multiple windings.
right. So maybe it would be like down here. If
Yeah,
were
you
going
wouldn't
like
have this card. You would have just the inductors.
that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then what other topologies come after the?
So after double four, I was going to go talking about hard switching.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
reason why I like using the word hard switching now is because these high-end graphics cards, especially recently, when you use it with a double forward power supply, it works. It works fine. But you're hammering that transformer with these transient spikes that double forward does not have the response time to keep up with. And you get this noise out of the main transformer. Woo. Yeah, so
Okay.
if you have
So if you have coil wine,
to the
then
extreme.
what is that?
To the extreme,
is
yeah.
that still coil
so, yeah,
wine?
it's still coil wine.
Okay.
Is a generic term, right?
Right.
Right. And so again, from a component level, you're talking about hitting this thing.
Yeah.
So when somebody hears
So
the
it's
word,
like the copper wires just sitting there going, just literally screaming.
and so when someone says hard switching, they're talking about the
Switching of the primary MOSFETs. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's hitting those hard, which is then hitting this hard.
Yep. And,
Okay.
then of course the MOSFETs aren't making the noise. It's this thing that's making the noise.
Right. All right. And so that's with the dual forward topology.
Right.
Oh,
The
question.
double forward.
Is it double forward or dual forward?
Come on.
Okay. All right. There you go.
No, it's two forward, which they use that one as well. So.
Yeah.
All right, and then you get into LLC, which is resonant topology. Basically, it's a frequency. It's a much more complex IC. It relies on adjusting the frequency based on the load, right? So it's changing the switching frequency. So it's not as hard. It doesn't have to be hard. And what that does is that gives you better efficiency. You'll see all the higher efficiency power supplies use it because it can adjust that frequency across a wide range of loads.
Mm-hmm.
You end up with a more flat line efficiency.
So where does it get that what
It
LLC?
gets the
What does that
data.
mean?
It gets the data through the optocouplers.
How about just LLC? Like I understand that that's actually
A coil cap.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So when we're talking L inductance, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we even see that in this particular one?
They have what they call the LLC tank, and that's this inductor right here.
There you go. Very cool. And again, a lot of people just probably don't know.
Tilt for
Well, if you don't see the IC, you can look for that.
Yeah. Okay. And then so.
But then it also looks like a transformer, so you really don't know. I mean,
all right. And when
it'll have an L. If you can read the BCB, it'll have an L designation instead of a T designation, if that means anything.
oh,
I mean, if you look at all the text, it's all labeled. So
interesting. Okay. And then how about the C part of in this particular setup?
it's just extra capacitance on the primary side.
It would be incorrect, I guess, to say if someone was like, "Oh, well, the C part is these big
No.
capacitors."
Everybody has that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good.
You have to have this. They call it smoothing caps, bolt caps, hold up caps.
Mm-hmm.
They have again multiple names, but they all do the same thing regardless of the topology.
Yeah. And the reason I ask these kinds of questions is because it's easy for a newbie to the power supply game who's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, I want to learn about this because power supplies are important to my computer, right?" And so they're like, LLC, get that L means inductor, so I'm gonna go find an inductor in
Oh
here.
yeah, no.
And so it's not always super simple. You can't just be like,
Yeah.
it must be this one right here.
That's why reviews are good, because they can get into it.
Point
Because
things
you're
out
not going
for
to
us.
want everybody to open up the power supply and look inside it.
right.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And generally you shouldn't open the power supply if you don't have a specific reason or know what you're doing. So,
Right.
like most other components.
Very
right?
true. Very
Yeah.
true. Should we even touch on ACRF, the active clamping reset forward?
Oh, no.
No? and
I don't get into that.
Right, and is that simply because that has become a less frequently used topology?
Yeah,
these
I mean,
days?
because it's double forward, but you're improving it some by clamping the peaks of the the wave, right?
Yeah,
Is all it is. But it's still performance-wise, you're still getting double forward performance. It's just more efficient because it's got a more compressed waveform.
And I guess that goes back to what you were saying a few minutes ago, where it was like you could have double forward and then the change could be on the secondary side.
Right.
So there can be changes
you can
all
have,
over the place.
Exactly. You can have double forward with DC to DC. You can have double forward with MOSFETs instead of Schottky diodes, right? It all comes into play as a complete package, right? Again, that's why, reviews are so important.
Yeah.
Especially with the complete teardowns, not some guy that just plugs into his PC and looks at the voltages through hardware info.
Or looks at a kilowatt meter.
Or kilowatt, yeah.
And approximates something from who knows what. Yeah.
On the input, let's call it EMI filtering.
Yeah. The X and the Y
that's a good
caps,
question.
yeah.
Would you call this input area EMI filtering or protection or?
No, filtering because, well, you have filtering, you have protection. You also have a thermistor in there that for surges, that come in. It's an NTC thermistor. It's basically a big resistor, and it slows down inrushes to the bulk cap, so the bulk cap doesn't pop, right?
Yeah.
That's protection. That's separate from the X and the Y caps that are doing the EMI filtering, right? So the EMI filtering, like I said earlier, is preventing the EMI from this to go back out to your mains.
So on a great power supply on the input side, you want it to have X caps, Y caps.
It has to, or it's not going to pass FCC testing or any of the regulations that require EMI. So like
what you're
KCC
saying
and CCC.
Is that I'm going to open up every power supply and all those parts are always going to be there?
Well,
they'll always
no,
work
because
great.
they're not always all certified.
Right.
Right.
Know this, people. They're not always certified.
And also, there's
You
a
have to
problem.
be careful of fake marks too.
Yeah.
Like, because there's a
Well,
lot of.
and a lot of them are self-declaration,
Yeah,
and so you only
yeah.
get in trouble when you get caught.
Right.
And then when you get caught, you just either remove the logo or you just actually do it right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. At that point, yeah. And we've seen that before too. I was gonna say like, I don't think any consumer really. So you can look up the certifications and pull the product and its report, but if you're as a consumer, if you're at a point where you're pulling up a certification to see if it's legit, just buy something
Then it probably
else.
isn't. Yeah. If you have to ask.
Yeah, then buy something else.
One of the things that I'm learning as I go along here is that on the input side, sometimes you'll see like a little tiny PCB right here.
Yeah.
With I guess is it some kind of integrated circuit on it? Discharge IC?
Yes.
Okay, so it
That's
sounds
that's a
obvious.
new thing. So, but not everybody has to comply to it.
Okay.
Okay. So recently there was a change from IEC. It's a Swiss the Consortium Electrical
Regulation
Safety.
body.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I forget what it stands for all of a sudden. I just looked at it yesterday. So it used to be IEC 60238. Now it's okay. Anyway, 623
numbers.
IEC 62368-1 is the new one, and it's only been in place for 2 years, and that's something that's been added to it, right? And that's to basically prevent somebody from opening it up, touching the bulk caps, and killing themselves.
Okay.
Right.
Quite
Yeah.
literally.
So it's good to have.
Yeah. So I mean, they did things like that. They also defined that the spacing here has to be the largest diameter of your shape is no more than 3 millimeters.
Also,
To prevent, your
stick stuff in
traces have to be so far from the edge of the PCB. The PCB edge has to be so far from the housing. This is all stuff that they define in that safety.
that's pretty cool.
But you don't have to adhere to it. That's the thing. Like UL, nobody requires UL except for on commercial devices. Consumer level doesn't have to be UL or TUV, right? So you can buy it, and it doesn't necessarily mean it meets any of those safety requirements because they don't have to. It's not a law, right? So,
Yep. But so certainly good things to have though.
absolutely. I mean, they're doing it for a reason. They're not doing it just to waste our time. So,
Safety is good, kids. All right. So then, from this input filtering, as we move into, I guess, the active power factor correction stage.
yeah.
The way that I'm learning about it is that you generally have a few different components in here. You're going to have your bridge rectifier, right? And that's just to take the AC in and turn it into a DC-ish signal.
Right. DC-ish, I like that.
Yeah, so because it's still got the caps on it, right? Yeah.
Right.
And to be clearer on that, what I'm saying is that the AC to DC rectifier, or the AC, the bridge there, it basically takes the AC signal, which is going up and then down, and it's taking the bottom part and flipping it up. But
Kinda
you still have these
like
hills on top.
If you know anything about electrical history, I thought this was fantastic. Was, AC you generate with the generator, right? You just turn a crank
it, yeah.
You can make AC. And this guy, he was making DC back in the 1600s, and the way he was doing it was he had this disc that spun around, and it alternated with the poles of the AC, but it only pulled the power from one side, just like the rectifier. So he was it was the first way of making DC out of AC.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so like on Wikipedia, there's like a picture of the drawing of the thing and the disc spinning around.
Wow, that's awesome.
I thought it was really cool. But it's funny though, is because they're doing that hundreds of years ago, and it's kind of the same thing we're doing here, but in a much smaller package.
Right.
So then from the rectifiers, we run into this set of components over here.
Yeah.
And
just to go back to this, your bridge rectifier is not always a bridge diode. You also have a thing called a MOSFET bridge on some of the higher end products. Just FYI. It's smaller and more efficient.
I don't think I've seen that yet. That's pretty great. So the ones that I've seen mostly are like GBU packages where it's just
that's like most of them.
Okay.
But
there is a higher quality version.
A higher, yeah. So for smaller, especially for smaller, more efficient things, like if you were to do like an SFX 1000-watt platinum, you couldn't. There's just not enough room, and this generates way too much heat to make that work.
Okay.
Just an FYI. So you don't want to tell people, here's a bridge diode. All of them have it. I'm just giving you the caveat. Again, that goes back to the whole topology thing. There's all these different topologies.
Yeah. And so the next set of components here, is it right to call that a boost converter?
Yeah, you could. I mean, because you are boosting to the bus voltage.
Right, because you're coming in with something like 60 hertz AC at like in the US 120 volts, right?
Right.
And do you lose some of the voltage in the rectification process? So you're still coming at 120,
right?
But then you need to get it up a lot higher.
Right. So you got to boost it up to whatever the bus voltage is, 420, 440,
gotcha.
Whatever.
So, and I'm sure you can go on Wikipedia and you can look at like how these converters are designed to boost it.
Yeah.
And they usually have like an inductor in there,
right?
And the capacitor. And in this case, the capacitor in that converter design is represented by this guy.
Right. The bolts.
This bolt.
Yeah.
So here's a question that I've seen asked before: why have these two as opposed to having just a giant one?
Well, you can't have a giant one. Absolutely. You can't have a giant one. But the thing is whatever. At the end of the day, it needs to be the capacitance. The capacitance and the voltage that you need at the end, right? So you'll see plenty, not here, but you'll see plenty of power supplies. You can have one, you can have four, you can have six, right? It just depends on how much real estate you have, and you might not have enough real estate for two side by side, but maybe one big one. But then it would have to be taller, right?
Gotcha.
So that all just comes down to just PCB layout.
Yeah, form factor you're trying to fit. And then
right. Yeah, like an SFX power supply, you're not going to be able to put two big bolt caps in there.
Right.
Gotcha.
You're going to need one fat squatty one shoved in the corner,
And so then I guess that brings me back to the main purpose of
flashbacks of math class.
Yeah.
The main purpose of this whole APFC circuit is to unify voltage and current. That's right.
Right.
And so there is sort of like a feedback loop happening.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
Okay, and so what's controlling all that?
There's the controller IC. This is actually you actually have a controller IC that is controlling, monitoring all of that on the primary side.
And is that another thing we might find on like these daughter boards on here, or maybe mounted on the bottom of the PCB?
It could be mounted on the bottom. I haven't seen it too much personally, if at all.
That's good to know.
Usually
right?
on the top side. I mean, it depends on how crowded it is, right? Obviously, if you have a double layer PCB, you could certainly put it on the bottom. That's fine. It's only signal, so you're not going to lose any efficiency. A lot of times, you want to keep things as close together as possible, as long as current's going through it.
Yeah.
To maintain efficiency, but yeah, something like an IC, I guess you can put on the bottom.
Yeah, and then then the next piece is just moving over to the switching, right?
Right.
Why are we switching? What's the again?
Pick a side.
I know.
Why do we have to switch?
I know, right? Why are we switching from DC to AC? Only to switch back to DC again. I don't know if we had talked about it here, but remember I was saying there's always trade-offs. You know, you break one thing, or you fix one, you break one thing.
Yeah.
You fix one thing, you break something else.
Exactly, right.
You increase the switching frequency, you increase the EMI. Same thing with the bus voltage. You increase the bus voltage, you lose efficiency, you increase EMI, right? So you're constantly doing this balancing act.
And so the idea is,
I mean, you can make it like absolutely tiny if the switching frequency is really high, but the EMI might be completely uncontrollable, at least within reasonable cost.
right.
That's the thing.
Also,
Anything
like,
is possible if you throw a ton of money at it.
Well, yeah, that's what most of it comes back to too. Like when we were talking about the modular cables coming out the other end of it, you know, it's there are solutions to many of these things, but consumers don't want to pay for them, and manufacturers don't want to pay to make them for to no end.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I guess kind of wrapping up here, just we had a whole discussion on this side of the power supply for the misconceptions video, where if you're curious about the part I just mentioned, modular cables and standardizations, along with other common top level aspects that people are confused about in forums online, check out that video. Otherwise, I think this probably gets us a pretty good starter for the technical side of things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And thank you, Jon,
You're welcome.
for the class on power supplies. We appreciate it. And Stone's over here learning too. This I can see it happening where it's becoming. I need to learn so I can review these better. so check back for the reviews as we do more of those. But anyway, yeah, check back for Corsair content. You can subscribe for more as always. And big thanks to Jon for the education. We'll see you all next time.